So a lot of people wondering, how did we get here, and will the Supreme Court's ruling on abortion impact other rights?
We have legal and political analysts Laura Fink and Wendy joining us this morning. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I want to ask you both, why did this happen now? Here we are 49 years after that landmark case, and it just got overturned. So let's start with that, give people a little bit of context on why we are even, dealing with this. Wendy, we can start with you.
Well, the reason that this was the prime time for finding a case to actually make this type of a revolutionary reversal, which is actually what it was the Constitution of the U.S. Supreme Court. Remember that former President Trump appointed 1/3 of the court as it currently stands. So with a 6-3 conservative majority, you can imagine that the types of cases that they're deciding to hear has been greatly influenced by that composition, as no doubt has the lively discourse behind the scenes. And that was reflected in this case by not only the way it broke down through party lines, and I say party lines loosely because obviously these justices swore and took an oath not to allow party to influence their decisions, but this was the time for conservatives on the court to be more receptive to this type of an argument that there wasn't a constitutional right to abortion to begin with, even though it's been on the books and on the books law-wise for the last 50 years. So that's why the timing was right.
Yeah, the Supreme Court's supposed to be a neutral group of people. Laura, what's your take on that?
Well, ultimately, Wendy is right, and I would go even further and say that it was a litmus test. The Federalist Society and the other people who really educated and handpicked these jurists for this job, this was absolutely a litmus test by which they matriculated through the federal bench and through their experiences as jurists prior. And yes, it is absolutely landmark that President Trump was able to pick not one, not two, but 3 justices, all from the very ultra-right conservative frame, and that no one would argue with that. So here we see, and of course, the absolute landmark case is Roe v. Wade. They promised to overturn it, these individual groups that hand-selected these justices, and it's essentially a campaign promise fulfilled. And I can't understate just how impactful it will be to women across this country. More than half the women will not have those critical healthcare decisions in their hands. And I do say California, as a bulwark against this, is modifying their constitution. So you can imagine how important this is and how much needs to be done if the Constitution needs to be modified in California to ensure that this right is protected. You can think about all of the complications that overturn, that rollback of fundamental human rights it will do to women across this country. And so you saw our 3 top legislators and our 2 top legislators and our governor react, and we'll put that on the ballot for California voters in the fall.
And Laura, on that note, a lot of people are wondering on the federal level if there's anything that pro-choice lawmakers or even the president can do to try to somewhat get back that protections that Roe v. Wade afforded women from that federal level.
Well, they could hold a vote, but we know that the filibuster will preclude anything from getting through the Senate, and that is what would need to happen. We did see the Defense Department state that they will not be following the ruling in Roe v. Wade. The Defense Department and military readiness may be dependent on women accessing that health care on base, and so you can see that and although abortion is limited, the access, depending on where you are, we know there are many, many red states that have military bases, and so you see the Defense Department reacting, Eric, and you may see other departments reacting in kind. But again, we are in the mire because it's been 50 years since we've seen something like this. And so a lot of these sort of legal complications will need to be ironed out.
And now, of course, the next question, what will happen next? Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas saying gay rights contraception rulings should be reconsidered after Roe is overturned. Wendy, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I could go the whole rest of the show on that because that's one of the issues that is on everybody's mind. But why? Because of what Justice Clarence Thomas wrote. You talk about different levels of ideology. He is far right of the other justices in thinking, well, now we're going to have a fresh look at these other cases, at other constitutional rights. rights that are not enumerated specifically in the Constitution, as many of them were not back in the day when it was written. And so those types of things have people on edge worrying it's a slippery slope. It's going to have a snowball effect. This is the beginning of the end. But remember, he's alone in making that statement. And in fact, let me go farther than that and say Justice Alito, in his opinion, couldn't have been more crystal clear that this majority opinion was not about other constitutional rights, but narrowly tailored to abortion. In fact, he took a significant portion of the opinion talking about that, already knowing, probably from what they discussed when they were coming down with this opinion, that this was going to be an issue given that Justice Thomas was going to say this in his concurrence.
Yeah, Wendy, I know we only have a few seconds. Laura, if you want to quickly wrap on that.
Well, in a few seconds, all I can say is that's not necessarily the case. Privacy and the right to privacy is what was removed. That's the legal argument and the legal rationale that the justices used to overturn Roe. And that means no matter what they say in a single line, that Justice Thomas is right. All of those other rights are up for debate with this very conservative court to be the one that will rule on them.
Okay. All right. Wendy and Laura, we always appreciate your insight. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.